Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today, tonight. This is Grant Cameron, and I have a very special guest. This is a show you do not want to miss. I first heard my guest tonight on Buddha at the Gas Pump, and when I heard the lecture or the interview that she had done, I said, this girl I got to interview. In 1987, Whitley Strieber published a book in the UFO community called Communion. It was a best-selling book. There was actually a movie that was done. Eric Clapton, who is a rumored experiencer in the UFO field, did the music for the movie. It was a best-selling book. And when the book was published, he was going to call it Body Pain. He found his experience to be so painful that he was going to call it Body Pain. In the middle of the night, just before he was going to publish, his wife, whose name was Anne, started to channel in the middle of the night. And it was in a weird voice. And what she said is, no, we shall not call it Body Pain. We will call it Communion, because that's what it is. When the book was published, there was at least 200,000 letters. This is before the internet. This is when you actually had to put a piece of paper in a typewriter and actually type it out and put a stamp on an envelope. They have received 200,000 letters, which are now at Rice University in a collection. People saying, me too, your book, I know what you're talking about. And his wife, Anne, put together a reading session where she read all these hundreds of thousands of letters. She hired a secretary, and they were reading all these letters, and it became a book called The Communion Letters. Anyway, halfway through, when she had read a lot of these letters, she came into Whitley and she said, Whitley, whatever the UFO phenomena is, it has something to do with death. And I would absolutely now agree that if we get into the point where we understand what happens at death, what happens before birth, we will understand what's actually going on, how the universe actually works, because we're just looking at 70 or 80 years, which is a little time blimp in history. We have to understand, and my guest tonight has to do with near-death experiences. I have had the honor of interviewing Eben Alexander, thanks to Sinead Wellahan's ability to get that interview. This interview tonight will be as good as Eben Alexander's interview. My guest tonight is a PhD, a doctor. Her name is Ingrid Honkala, and she would be very interested in the UFO community. She has actually worked for NASA, which is very much involved with UFOs, and she's also worked for the US Navy and has done a number of projects, has been to 70 plus countries, which she'll talk about. And the people who are in the UFO community know that the ATIP program studied UFO experiences inside the US Navy. So people will be very interested in that. She's written a book called A Brightly Guided Life, How a Scientist Learned to Hear Her Inner Wisdom. This story is absolutely riveting. We had a pre-interview done, and I was joined by Katerina Castillo, who is an assistant of mine, who is under the weather tonight, but we actually had the pre-interview, which is 2 hours. Ingrid has more material. She is coming out with a second book, more material that I think people need to read, they need to understand, because she is in contact. As I've described, I wrote a book called Contact Modalities, and I wrote a book called Inspired, where I believe everything is in the field. All the information is in the field. Certain people can get into the field. And let me absolutely guarantee you, Ingrid has been in the field. She's brought back material that explain a lot of the things that go on in the world today. And so I want to welcome Ingrid. At one point in her life, she'll get into this, she actually said, my name is not Ingrid, don't call me that. I don't need a name, and she'll explain that. But tonight, Ingrid Honkala, PhD, thank you for honoring me to do this interview with me, and I'm just absolutely honored to have you here.
I'm so honored to be here and to meet you and have the possibility to talk with you and that get that pre-gathering all together. This has been great. Thank you for having me here. And I love when we met and you say, oh, the girl with no name.
Yes, you've got a lot of wisdom. You deal with with beings. We'll get into that. You deal with energy beings, and you may not know. I'm going to try to link. I'll try to stay out of your story, but I will link from time to time how your story links up with the stuff in the UFO community. It's the same, basically the same stuff. For example, the number one being seen by people, they had a survey that was done of 3,200 experiencers who claimed that they had interaction with the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena. The number one being that was seen was energy beings. And you had the energy beings. So we'll get into that. We'll give what they told you. And I want to start with your story. So let's start with your story that started the whole thing. You're just below 3 years old. And here's another link to the UFO community. When you take a look at experiencers, somebody who said, I think I've been on board the ship, when you regress them, you find out it goes back. We call them lifers. It goes back to the crib. And people will say, these evil aliens, look at, they grabbed this kid when the kid was 2 years old. This is terrible. How could you possibly do that? So your experience started just before you're 3 years old. I want you to tell the story, but I want you to link it into, you asked the question, why did you take me so early? Why did this happen so early? And I think the answer that they gave you is very informative to people as to what's going on.
Yes, you want me to give that answer first, or
yes, yeah, to describe, because people will wonder, like, this is terrible, this young kid, you know, it gets taken out, and why would they, especially if we get the idea, is this pre-designed? Is this a random event, or was this planned? Because a lot of people in the UFO community are starting to realize that no, this is not an accident. Like people say, oh, the being was with me in my last lifetime, and they talked about reincarnation. And so you're telling the same sort of story. I think that wasn't a random event that happened to you. This wasn't something that you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It has more meaning to it. So that's why it's so important why they took you so early, because it's very, very important.
And you know what? Yeah, in like years later, once we talk about more about the beings of light and all that, but years later, when I asked what was the purpose of this happening so early, the answer was because you were old enough to remember, but young enough not to be conditioned yet.
Exactly. Wow. And you even have a joke. I tell people the joke: if you have not been abducted by, had an encounter with aliens by the time you're 10 years old, forget it. They're not interested in you because you're preconditioned. There's so much stuff in your head, they can't talk to you. So they have to, it's almost like the Bible talks about, raise your children when they are young and they will know where to go when they get old. You try to teach your children as young as possible before they're conditioned. And that's what you were told. That once you get conditioned, it's very hard to get a message across to somebody.
Yes, and they kept saying that how important it was that I was a pure mind. They said your mind was pure and innocent. So this way, like you just saying it, things could flow without any tinted ideas or anything, and that's how it all happened. And this is the other thing I keep saying to people that is incredible. Every time I tell my story, I always say, people ask me how it's possible that you didn't forget being so young, that you can remember, you're able to remember this. And I said, always kept saying, I said, because the doors never close. And recently the beings of light said to me, of course the doors never close, Ingrid, because there are no doors. And because your mind was so open, pure, innocent, no conditioned, so you did not have all the blockages, just like you're saying, you didn't have all those layers. What happened later, yeah, you come with that open mind, and as you start getting conditioned and all the beliefs and the culture and the school and the parents, now you create all these layers. And we can talk more about that, but they gave me incredible analogies, how we are like the light, and we start putting these layers until we cannot shine that light anymore. So it's like the whole process of waking up is how we go and peel these layers and go back to that light that we are. And I can talk about that when I describe my near death and how I started to realize that I was that light.
Yeah, so what you're basically saying is the same thing I've told people, is that anybody can access the information. It's you have to be able to get through. You build these filters that block. It's like the left brain. It's the noise of the signal. You're on a radio station, but there's so much noise in the signal, you can't pick up the signal. And when you quiet your mind, or when you're very young like that, you pick up the signal. The signal is there for everybody. It's not just, you're not special.
Exactly, for everybody. You know, this is when you say you're not special, it's beautiful, because there was a moment that I felt so different from everyone else growing up and having all this awareness, all this knowledge. And then I asked the beings, so like, why me? And they said, because you are special. And I said, what do you mean when you say that I am special? And they said, everybody is special, but they don't know it yet.
There you go.
Exact. So it's that part where, like, yeah, we have this amazing, to give the analogy of the radio, and all the waves are right here. Everything is right here, right now. But you have to learn to put the dial in the right place and to put the antenna in the right place. So it's that you have to, in terms of how can I listen? By quieting the mind. How can I be connected? By quieting the mind. But most of the time, grand people don't want to do the work. They want others to be the messenger, others to be the ones telling them how or when or where. Is like, and they lose their inner power. I said the whole work is go back and realize that you are capable for more than you can imagine, to do more and be more.
And sometimes we'll get into the story of what happened. But when I wrote the book Contact Modalities, I talked about the idea of trauma. That trauma sometimes breaks the veil for you. That you end up as your condition. And I actually put up on the internet, I said, can anybody actually be spiritually enlightened without some sort of pain or some sort of learning? That we sort of think that it's just going to come to us, that if we get rid of all the bad stuff. But you've actually had more than one near-death experience. You've had a bunch. You can maybe get into a little bit about that as well. You've had a lot of very serious injuries where you had this sort of the filter was shut down for you, where you were popped into another reality. So let's start with the story, your first near-death experience, and the one that started the whole thing for you and led you down this path where you became this scientist. And usually scientists aren't really into the spiritual stuff. They're more into nuts and bolts and rational analytical stuff. And so I think you have an important voice in terms of the fact that you are a PhD, an oceanographer, and you knew it from a very young age you were going to do this. And so I think you carry a very important message that they may listen to you where they may not listen to me.
Yes, and you know, this is the incredible gift of the universe, how there's all of us with different capabilities, different ways of being, different ways of perceive things that can be the life for the ones that are more analytical or more logic or more spiritual or more sensitive. So this is incredible because we can find our place in different voices, yeah, and in different experiences. So there's place for everybody and possibilities for everybody. And yes, in my case, Grandis has opened the doors for me to be able, or for people that had high degrees in science, in medicine, in engineering, and all kind of stuff like that, to approach and say, I have had these experiences, but I cannot talk to anybody. But since you are a scientist, I can talk with you. So this is beautiful. I just think the universe is so giving, so compassionate, so amazing that it gives opportunity to everybody. And we just can become that voice for the people that feel, oh, I need this kind of person to be able to trust, or this kind of path, or this kind of guidance. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah, beautiful. So tell the story of what happens when you're a young girl, and I'll try to not interrupt, and you can go with the story because it is a fascinating story.
Yes. So what happened, Ran, is that, like you say, I was close to 3 years old, and I was born in Colombia, and my parents used to work and would leave us at the care of a maid. And she was a lady that when my parents were not there, is like, she will go do her thing and forget about the kids. And we were 3, actually. The youngest one was like 1 year old. And my oldest sister, who was close to 4, so imagine just 3 little girls, and I decided, let's go play in the patio. No one is watching. We went to the patio, and there was a tank And the purpose of this tank was to collect water for hand washing clothes, because back then we didn't have a washing machine. And this was a pretty big tank. It held about 900 gallons of water. And then the whole thing about the tank is that my sister and I found a ball and decided, oh, let's play cash across the tank. So, okay, the tank was, like I said, big. We climbed the walls with the stools, and she sat on the flat surface for scrubbing. And I sat on the other side, and the other side was a very thin edge. So I was leaning very precariously on this tank, but you know, we're having fun, who's thinking about any danger. And she grabbed the ball and she threw the ball and didn't apply enough force. And it fell on the water. And oh, of course, I can grab the ball. I leaned forward. And when I tried to grab it, it rolled. And I lost my balance and fell in the tank. I had never been in a pool. I never had my head under the water. So I did not have idea that if you are underwater, you cannot breathe. So imagine at this moment, the impact of why I cannot breathe. And the other thing, the first thing I felt when I touched this water with my body was that people have the misconception that because I come from Colombia, I am from cold, hot weather country, but Bogota is very high up in the Andes. So the temperature in this water had to be around 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is actually very important for this kind of accident, because the water being so cold was the one that actually helped for me not to be dead, completely dead. But it comes that I just felt the sense of like this water is freezing, and now the sense why I cannot breathe. So I went into this state of absolute horror. And when I am in this experience, in just this horror, in just like that, Granny, just a blink, I went to a state of absolute, complete peace. I didn't know what happened at the moment, but a second ago, I needed to get out of this tank. I needed to breathe. I was desperate. And now I was like, oh, I don't need to breathe. I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to ask for anything. Everything was just perfect, cool, nice. I was just in the state of, oh, this is so good. And again, when people ask me, how is it possible for me to remember? This is the word I like to use, contrast. Throughout this experience, there was a lot of contrast. So to name some of these, one of the things is this house was the house where I live, and was very noisy. I had my sisters, there was birds, there was dogs, and my cousins were next door. It was always noise. And right before I went to the state of peace, the last thing I heard was my heart beating very loud. And in that state of anguish and terror, it was like my heart was beating in my head like a drum. And the moment I went to the state of peace, it was like boom, boom, boom. Nothing. So this is what I call, Grant, experiencing the silence behind the silence. Absolute peace. And I love this silence and this peace so much that was one of the things that also kept me connected with the experience, is that after this, for years, I wanted that silence back. And later in my life, I will hide in closets, in chapels, in wherever I craved that silence. The other big contrast was that this tank was entirely made of cement. It was very dark, a space. It had a roof, and it was very early in the morning. So this was dark. And the last thing I saw when I was in the tank with my eyes open was the darkness of the space. And right in that moment, when I went into the state of peace and well-being, the first thing I saw was a light that just turned on. It just came from below. And this water was soft, but was able to illuminate the whole watery surrounding. So imagine after the terror of the darkness, now peace and light is like, oh, now there is light. And then when I am immersed in this light, now I start seeing bubbles. And the bubbles were surrounded by light. And it was by chasing these bubbles that I turn around. And the moment I turn around is when I see a body. And at that moment, I have the realization, oh, that's my body. And the body is just there in the water, and it had the eyes open. And it was that sense of like, oh, this is familiar. Like this already happened before. There was no fear. There was not even surprise. Like, oh yeah, that's my body. Yeah. And then it comes the next contrast. And it's when you talk about this element of suffering and pain. I was born as a very sick child. And people sometimes wonder why these things happen, why children. And I was born very, very sick. And I spent almost like those 3 years of my life being so unwell that I didn't even know what feeling well meant until I am in this absolute state of well-being. Oh my God, it feels so good. That what do you think happened? The moment I saw that body and realized that's my body and I'm feeling so well, I'm like, I'm not going back there. Forget it. So this is the thing. And I think if I would have been born as a very healthy girl and my life would have been so good, I would not have had that contrast, and I might forget the experience. And now, like when you talk about pre-plan, see, this is one of the things. It was important that I could experience this contrast. So at that moment, it's like, it was that knowing, oh, this is how it feels. And this is how I want to be in this moment. So when I look at the body and I had this clarity, and this is the other thing, I knew that I could leave the body. I had this clarity and I turned around and I left. And the moment I turned around, I started to see flowers. And it was flowers that were blooming from nowhere. And this is the other thing. There was not sense of dimension, because imagine this is flowers, but now the flowers pick me up. So how big these flowers supposed to be? But there was no thought, like there was not any at this point analytical logic, and I am a child, so I'm just having fun. So I'm being picked by these flowers. And I put the analogy is like going back to the womb, where you don't have to do anything. You're just being done. And I'm being carried, and I'm like, whoa, just like, whoa, this feels so good. State of absolute bliss. I don't have to do anything. And it's when something happened again, like I'm in this bliss, and in just a blink, I appear in the maid's room. And I'm looking at the maid from above, and I'm like floating in the ceiling. And Grant, this experience is so clear in my head that I can even remember the soap opera she was listening in the radio.
And you checked that later, correct?
I did, and we proved that the name, everything, and it was playing in that year, everything. Yeah. So I looked at her and I'm like, oh, that's Maria. Completely unaware. So from that, in another blink like that, I appear in my mom's path. My mom didn't have a car, and she, like I said, she left very early, and she was walking, and she was pretty close to her bus stop. This was a big neighborhood. She had to cross all these roads. And then I just look at them. This is what blows everybody's minds away, and what validates the experience, because this is the other thing. And later we'll talk about this, but the beings of light said to me, for all your experiences, there will be always witnesses. So this validates the whole experience in which sense. When the moment I saw my mom, I said, oh, that's mom. And she stopped. She did not hesitate. She didn't give any other step. And she knew at that moment something is happening at home with one of my babies. and she turned around. You know, I don't give this background story because it's too long and stuff, but my mom had just got a new job. What would have been the thing to do logically? I'm not going to, this is my new job, I have to keep going to my job. No, it was, this pull was so strong that my mom, I say she was very intuitive, but that she also listened to her intuition. So she started to run. And I looked at her like with the surprise, like, what, she's running? And the moment I kind of changed my sense of like a view or my direction of the view, I see a dog. And when I saw the dog, immediately, because I love animals, I'm with the dog. So I'm like, whoa. So I'm like, oh. And then I changed my perception again and I see a park. And the moment I feel the desire to be in the park, I am in the park. So I'm like, now, like, this is so cool. And I'm playing this game of being places. So for me, the what I knew about or the experience up to that moment of space and time was completely changed. So now I could be anywhere at any time.
That was one of the things, I'll just jump in here. That was one of the things that really amazed me when I heard your story. I said, I got to talk to, I'm writing a book called UFO Sky Pilots. And we have piles of witnesses who will describe exactly that. 2 women on board the craft. And they said, where would you like to go? And so she thinks of something and they said, think about it in your mind. And that's the key thing. Think about it in your mind. And she said, instantly they were there. And people are all describing this idea that if you're in this field, they call it a matrix field in the UFO field, the matrix field, time and space do not exist. The human thought. And so when you describe this thing where you're going from place to place instantaneously, that's exactly what these people describe. So the question is, are they on board a craft? Are they having an out-of-body experience? Are they having a near-death experience? It all seems to be linked together, that we can learn something by you as a scientist describing this fact that when you get into this matrix field, there is no time and space. It's the mind controls everything, correct?
Yes, and everything is here and now. And we can talk more about that later because I have had many experiences. I have experienced myself as a multi-dimensional being and being able to be in the future, the past, be pretty much like we call a time traveler. Just because everything is here and now. But yeah, we can talk more about that, but this is fascinating because yes, when we realize, wow, this whole idea that things can appear linear, but things we're also working in the perpendicular. So this is important.
Can I also ask you about a question that you brought up, which is a very important lesson. When you asked why did I go to see Maria? Like why did I go there and then to my mother? And they gave you this lesson of why you saw Maria before your mother.
Okay, you want me to do that or at the end of the whole?
Yeah, as long as you get it in, yeah, because I think that's a very important story. That's why I said the stuff that they're telling you is stuff I've heard before, and it's like, oh yeah, they're telling the same story. They're telling you this very, very wise material that is people should be listening to, because this is, I believe, how it works with what they're describing, and they've been telling you this stuff. So go ahead with your story, but make sure you get that in as to why you went to see the Maria before you went to see your mother.
Yes, this is the whole thing, and this is when we go to that part of, and there's so much material here, but that everything has a purpose and there's a symbol behind everything. Because when I go in the detail into everything, even when I saw the light that came from below, the moment I just drowned and I saw this light after just seeing darkness, and I saw light. And later in the future, when I asked the beings, I always thought that this light was, to say that the light of a candle, the light of something, a bulb, whatever light. They said, no, this was your own light. You realize your own light. So it's like the flowers. I was thinking, what was the flowers? And they said those were the beings of light, but my mind at that moment perceived them as flowers, something that I felt that I had connection with nature. So there's symbology in absolutely everything in life itself. But to keep with the story, then now I am jumping and having this fun, going to places. And again, just to mention it again, in just a blink, Now I appear in a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And this is so important, Graham, because it's the moment where all the, to say, the ideas of the mind, of the perception of the dog, the mom, the park, the staff, all gets cleaned. So you now have an empty canvas, and I enter to this realm of the light, clean from everything. And it's when, for the first time in almost 3 years, I have that sense like, imagine, no matter how well I was feeling, just multiply this by, I don't know how many times, I don't even have a number, because at this moment, it was the sense that I am home. I am home. And it completely filled my heart. Like I felt welcome. I felt that sense of like, I am back home. And if I'm saying I am back home, this means that this feeling was familiar again. See, and it was the sense that not even 3 years or almost 3 had passed. It was that sense like, I'm just back home. Like that very day I left my house, went to school, just to give an analogy, and I'm just coming back. So again, there was no time. And I'm in this space of feeling the sense like I'm being welcome, invited, embraced. And then is when I realized at this moment, although I had seen my body suspended in the water, up to this point, you know, this is amazing talking in the depth part of it, because I kept still working from the mind. At this point is when I realized I am not that body. I am not that personality. I am none of that. And what I came to realize is I am a being of light. And I started to dissolve, have that sense of I am just with the whole. There was that sense of separation, that sense of I'm something else started to dissolve. And this, when, but I was up to that point still having a sense of self. But this, even, I went to the state where I call it the sense of non-self, or the sense of, call it emptiness, I call it nothingness. And people get afraid about the word nothing, but I just said, no, is that, I said nothing because it's nothing that you know, but is the totality of everything. And it's not an experience I can describe, Cameron, because there was no sense of meaning or labeling or color or form or texture or feeling. It was just a state. And the only thing I could describe is, if I could put anything into word, will be presence, absolute presence, and consciousness, pure consciousness. But again, put it into words, I don't think, if people don't experience it, can never really.
Yeah. Now, some people who may be skeptical will say, well, okay, it's an illusion, it's just your mind or whatever. And a lot of people will talk about, compare that world to this world, because a lot of people that go into the other realm will say, you're the one living in the dream. That how does it compare, like compared to the life where people are making an assumption that this is the real world and there's nothing out there? Is it more real than the real world? It's more important, as you're describing, but can you compare the world, that world, and the world we think that when you think this is all there exists is a physical world, you've seen the other side. So can you compare the two worlds?
Yes, and absolutely real and expansive. It's just, you know, somebody shared with me an analogy of like a stadium, and in the middle of the stadium there is a bucket, and what you know about reality is that little bucket, when reality itself is the whole stadium. So imagine that's what happened. Is at that moment it was like realizing, oh, this is all I thought reality was, this little bitty, and it's all this. It's, you know, it's just so enormous. And I shared with you an experience that happened to me a couple of years ago, in which I woke up in my bed in the middle of the night, And when I wake up, I was so huge, so huge that I didn't feel in the bathroom. It was like I was bigger than the bathroom, bigger than I could even imagine I was. And I heard the words grandioso. So it's like, no, we are these huge, expansive beings, but yeah, whoop, we just packed in this little bitty reality that we call the real thing. When this is just that little bucket in the middle of that stadium, to give an analogy.
And you were lucky enough to have the experience, because you can sort of sympathize with people if they haven't had the experience, they wouldn't know. But once you've had the experience, it's like, oh, okay, now I understand. The experience is what it's about. And rather than, it's almost like they say the higher self knows, the smaller self thinks.
I love that. Yes, yeah. Yes. And you know, and no longer ago on because there's also things that are so profound, so deep, that I have to have a notebook and write down right when they're coming to me, otherwise I will forget.
Yeah.
So the question was, how can I forget? And this goes with what you just said. How can I forget these things if they're so profound? And the answer was because the mind cannot remember the ways of the divine.
Wow, I never heard that before.
Yes.
Wow.
The mind is so small, and the mind needs to filter everything, and this information that is so vast, so immense, so divine, the mind cannot remember, it cannot even try to grasp it, and only can grab little bitties. So
let me ask a question related to that, because I've had sort of, I call them flow states. I've had two major ones, one in 2012, one in 2017. Can you confirm to me that when it happens, you know? Like when the one happened in 2017, I was told 24 things, one after another after another. I'm walking down the street, it's very cold. I have to take off my gloves, and I'm writing, and I just knew, get a pen, start writing. I just knew, and you know, this is not an idea. This is the way it works. It comes with this sense of certainty that when you get the information, it's not a good idea, you know, to write it down, because it's almost like you're tapping in to absolute pure knowledge.
Yes, it's exactly that way. And if you leave it to the mind cannot even hold it, cannot even, you forget it. You the moment you try to even, what, because it's not an interpretation, it's pure knowledge. That's why when people ask me, Grant, they said, Ingrid, you believe this, you believe that. I say, I don't believe anything, I know.
Yeah.
That's a completely different thing.
There's even a thing in the UFO community where near-death experience, I don't know if you had, you'll talk a little bit about this once you had the experience, what happened to you as a child, but in near-death experience, I think I mentioned to you before, 31% of all people who've had near-death experiences say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And in the UFO community, it's 40%. And so I would actually ask these people, I'd say, well, how do you know you knew everything? How do you know there wasn't something number 6, 7, 8 on the far side of the galaxy that I forgot to tell you about? And they will say exactly what you and I would say is, I'm not sure, I just know. I know I knew everything. And it's this absolute certainty. And in my experience, I said the hardest thing to describe to you is the absolute sense of certainty. That is something you, unless you experience it, you can't understand. So you had that, because you had the thing when you came back where your life changed, where you started to become intuitive, and you started to, you were way ahead of other kids and stuff like that.
And this validates the whole thing again, because it's like, it's the proof that these things really happen. So yeah, so what happened, so in the story now, I am in this state of, I call it presence, being, just being. And then my mom finally arrived home. Remember, she just running back. And then this is the other amazing thing. We live in a very big house, and my mom knew exactly where to go. So again, is these things that come to your mind. So talking about pre-plans and things, yeah, later we will talk more about it, but the being so like, say, yeah, you were going to come back, and this all proves that. So my mom went directly to the back of the house where I was. And the other thing, my sister was there. People ask me why she didn't go to the maid, because everything is perfect. Because the maid was an abusive person, and we didn't meant to be in the patio playing in the tank.
Yeah.
So she wasn't going to go there and tell her. So, but there's another thing. The purpose of my sister being there was to confirm to my mom, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. So my mom jumped in the tank, got me out, and look at the other synchronicity. My mom worked with children, and she did some training, whatever it was that they taught at the time, to do CPR for children.
Yeah.
So otherwise she would not know how to save me. She got me out. She started to do whatever she was doing, but I was so disconnected from this reality, ran so disconnected that I didn't feel anything she was doing.
Yeah.
And then the only moment when things turn around is again in just a blink. I felt that I was jumping, I was pushed from the tallest building in the world. And there's nothing I could do to stop this. And my reaction at that moment was like, no, like I did. Nobody in other experiences, people are asked, you want to come back? Nobody told me. I was just pushed like, now you're back. And I felt like I was being sucked, like I was being vacuumed, like, and all my expansionness had to come back to the little bucket, you know? And I'm like, no. And then I'm back in the body. And I knew I was back because the feeling of this freedom was gone. Now the feeling of well-being was gone. Now I was feeling cold and sick and angry. I was so angry to be back. And of course, for my parents, it was so hard because now I just, after that, I refused to eat. I was very angry. I didn't want to be here. And I would look at myself in the mirror and tell my mom, you don't understand. This is not me. This is not who I am. I don't want to be here. And I don't meant to be here. I was angry. And the other thing, I came with that awareness. And when I would look at my parents, I had the realization, these are not just my biological parents. I felt them as my equal because I had experienced that state of oneness. And when I look at my body, I was like, I'm not this child. I'm not a child. Now I had, but imagine I didn't have the words. I didn't have the way to express what. So imagine the shock of having this child body and not being able to express what is trying to come through you. And the other thing, now the way also they could validate that something was different with Ingrid is because, like I told you, I'm just about to be 3 years old, and no long after my NDE, now I could read, I could write, I could resolve mathematical problems, I could put together complex puzzles. So how do you explain this? And thankfully, my mom was a teacher. She was getting also all her education in psychology for children. And so everything was working so well, because otherwise, if I didn't have my mom doing all these, they would have taken me to, who knows, psychologist stuff. But my mom was able to work with me. And the other incredible thing with my mom is that later I started to see more things when I started to go to school, and my mom later was able to validate to me that she also could see things that other people couldn't. So this brought her to be able to work with me and understand what was happening to me. But yeah, Graham, for me is like, but thankfully when I was going through these really, really hard times is when things just kept happening, and this whole connection and communication with what I call beings of light happen. But before going there, I would like to before we forget, to tell why did I go to the maze room before going to my mom. And this was a question I asked the beings of light many years later, when I asked them what was the purpose of my near-death experience. And they said, to bring back the message of the power of connection. And I said, how come? And then, see, the mind is so limited. The mind doesn't know anything. And then they're like, yeah, because look, remember when you had your near death and you saw your body? And I said, yes. And you turned around and left it? That was not your decision to make. At that moment, I was working from the egoic mind. Oh, Ingrid feels well, why I go back there? Then say that was not the pre-plan. you meant to come here and bring all these messages, do all these. Then they said, reason why you went to look for the maid and went to look for my mom, for your mom. And I said, oh no. So, but then I say, okay, so if I meant to come back, why did I go to the maid's room? Why did I waste time going to this lady's room? And they said, because that's where the contrast is. And again, I'm like, what? And they said, yes. What happened when you went to the maid's room? There was no connection. There was nothing, because this actually, like I mentioned, she mistreated us. So there was nothing there. There was not link. They said, what happened when you went to meet your mom? Unconditional love, complete connection. So of course she could read the message. So it is when they say, look, there's not separation. Like we were talking at the beginning, there's no distance. It's all right there in the mind. It's all the veils that we have. But she said you could communicate because that love brought you together. So they said to me, look what happened when there is no connection, when there is no love. And this is the other thing. Look at the symbology and the analogy here. My mom that was about 10 minutes away from home was the one that rescued me and knew where I was. The person that was few feet away from me couldn't do anything. There was no connection. So they said, look, when there is no connection, they will let you drown. When there is no connection, there will be war. There will be division, separation.
Yeah, that was the main message I got in 2017, is this idea of oneness versus separation. So maybe elaborate a little bit more on that. And basically, so the way I sort of spelled it out, as I was told, is there is only one, anything that you would consider evil in the modern world is based upon one thing and one thing only, the mistaken belief in separation. That when you have, we believe in separation, everything falls apart. And the oneness, and they must have talked to you a lot, because I think the number one message given to UFO experiencers is 54% were talked to about oneness and love. So if you're gonna think, oh, they're gonna talk to you about the government and about where to get some water or whatever. And no, it's oneness and love. That is the key message, and it seems to be through all spiritual traditions. This idea: remember who you actually are. You're not the character on the stage. You're playing an actor on the stage. You are not the actor.
Yes.
Did they talk to you a lot about oneness and this concept?
Yes, and not just talk about it, but he's brought you to, or in my experiences, to experience it, to be in it, to be it, like and have actually the actual experience, even like with the maid, with my mom, with like, look what happened, and look why having a human experience is so important, because it gives you the contrast you need to be shaken and to go back and, like you just said the word, remember who you are.
Yeah.
And just we have this shield around of again conditioning and all these layers, and it's just like peeling the onion. With every time you're being shaken, is one layer falls away. And yeah, people say suffering is needed. I said, yeah, like you would say, it's needed until it's not needed anymore. But if we learn to listen to the ones that already have the experience, to the people that have been there, then okay, we can make the path a little bit easier. But the thing is that we don't want to listen to others. I didn't even want to listen to the beings of light. They said to me, let yourself be carried in the divine guidance and just rest there. And I'm like, no, I'm going to resist. So there you go.
That's the ego mind fighting. You've had a lot of people may not realize you've had a sort of a traumatic life. You have not had an easy life. You were telling me you had a second near-death experience. You maybe just mentioned it briefly, and you've had a bunch of head injuries, and you've had all sorts of incidents on where you ran into people on the beach, and the stuff that you've experienced. I mean, you were very depressed at one time over what was going on. You've had not an easy life in terms of, it's almost like lesson after lesson after lesson that you learned from all the things that happened to you, but you did not have an easy life.
No. And the more I walk away, I would just say, the more we walk away from our true self, from that divine purity that we are. The more layers we pack, the more we're going to suffer, because the hardest is we're going to be shaken to go back to the core that we are. And that's what happened. And I share with you that until I was like 19 years old, my life, I had different kind of sufferings at the beginning. It was the suffering of not being understood, the suffering of feeling like I was an alien, of not fitting in, of like, what is going on? I couldn't relate with other children, because to me, they're like, what is happening to these people? They don't know anything. And my mom, I was just imagine this 3-4-year-old, and she will bring me to what, she will go meet her friends or whatever. And I didn't go there to play with other children, nothing. I would just sit, I would cross my leg, and I would listen to the conversation of the adults, because the kids I just felt like annoyed. And then I would just serious and listen, and they were talking about all the stuff, the drama, the life. And I had, imagine 3-4 years old, absolute clarity of like, oh, I know what she's talking about. Oh, really? And I would just think in my head, why they don't get it? It's so simple. It's so simple. And this is all perfect, Graham, because until I was like 19, I had a very spiritual life. I got the support of my mom. I got the support of my grandmother. My grandmother taught me how to meditate when I was 8. She started to bring all these spiritual books. But 9, I was reading very in-depth and very evolved teachings I was learning from Hinduism, Buddhism, Kabbalah, Christianism, all ways of religions. And by 15, I already had the absolute clarity. Wow, the core teachings, the core of all these religions is the same: love, unity, connection, oneness. And people got lost in the ritual. So imagine I was this child, but the more I was in depth in all this spirituality, the farther I fell from, of course, the people my own age. And at school, I was being bullied. I was being ostracized. I just, what do we do with this girl? So there was a moment when I was 19 years old, and I was now in college, and I had 3 sisters by then, and they were all beautiful, and boys and parties and life, and I wanted to belong. And it was the sense of like, I need to put my feet on this earth. Look, by 12, I was already telling my grandmother that I wanted to die, because I didn't feel that I belong. And imagine, we as humans have this urge of, okay, I have to belong to something here, or you just start feeling that you're just drifting farther and farther. So it's when I said that at 19, I had this very, very, very in-depth experience. Like I was in a bus, and I was having such conflict inside that there was a moment I said to the beings of light, I wish none of this was real. And I said to people, watch what you ask for. Because the moment I said this, everything started to dissolve. And the moment everything started to dissolve, I knew it was, again, that knowing the constituents, even like the biology, like the chemistry, like the physics, everything that made possible, for example, that bus to hold together and be what it was. And I could see just all the organic, inorganic constituents, the sound, the frequencies, the rhythm, everything that made this reality possible. And everything started to dissolve, including me. And I went to experience again that, call it realm of the light, that expansion state of being, of presence, that nothingness. For a few seconds, I was there again. And now I was not in a near-death experience of nothing. I mean, this bus in a state of complete conscious state of awareness. And then when I'm back in the bus, I had 2 very, very profound questions. I said, how is it possible to forget who we truly are? And when did we stop being one with the whole? But we had but I had at that moment a third question. And this is the part when the mind blocks everything. I felt like a victim. And that always that question, why me? Why this is happening to me? The moment I asked the third question, look, the door again, I created that, the veil. People said that the veil is the body. I said the veil is the mind. Because you can even become a complete, fully enlightened being with a body. So if the veil was the body, you could not be enlightened with a body. The veil is the mind. The moment I went back to my state of why me, whoop, the door closed. And it's when the beings of light said to me, listen to this. They said, in 20 years, you will understand. And at that moment, like, what, 20 years? That's ridiculous. What are you talking about? Because I wasn't ready. I needed to go through all these other things, all these other experiences to be ready. I needed to mature. I needed to grow. I needed to have more contrast. And then at that moment is when I said the beings of light, you know, I'm done. Can I just go? And then they said yes. So people tell me, how could you do that? How could you cut this connection with the beings of light? But it comes that clear understanding. I mean, it's like, it's simple as this. You could ask, how could you leave your parents' house? Same thing. You want to go to college. You want to be independent. You want to make your life. Same thing. So at that moment, my parents have been in, the beings of light had been like my parents. They've been in my life since the first near-death experience. I started to see them. We can maybe talk about that when I was 4. And I started to talk to them when I was 5. So I've been communicating and being with them for 19 years almost, or 17. And then at this moment, I said to people, it's like for all those years, to give an analogy, I was walking in a room with the lights on. So in this room, you have I have 2 analogies here. First analogy is like, it's when you leave your home to go to college and you tell your parents, okay, I'm going to college. So I said to people, you know, like your parents disappear. They're now 1 call away. Same thing with the beings of light. Say, I created a distance. And me being the radio, like we talked at the beginning, it's not like they went anywhere. I changed my dial. I lower my vibrational frequency. And incredibly, what happened, even for me to lower my vibrational frequency, this is all magic. This is perfect, Grant. The first person I met at that moment in my life that became my boyfriend was not someone that was spiritual, not someone that was like, all like, no, because then I keep the same, was a very, very, like, I would just say with the feet very, very put on these grounds. He was a musician. He liked rock. He liked even heavy metal. He had long hair. He was partying. He was like, I needed really ground. Which career I picked? Science. See? So nothing happened without a reason. All these choices were made because this grounding was very important for me. And it comes the next analogy. I said to people, imagine that for all these years, I was in a room with the lights on. And when the lights on are in the room and the room was full of furniture, you can see everything. You know where you're walking. I'm not going to trip with that table because I see the table. But what happened when you turn the light off? Now everything becomes an obstacle. And that's what happened for me and these other 20 years of my life. All the sufferings, all these other things came to my life, and now I have to just work it myself. And sufferings that happens to all of us in life, but sometimes incredibly when we're in the spiritual path and the path of truth seeking, this multiplies, and it's just and you mentioned experiences where I was almost raped and murdered, when I was again robbed in the streets, when I was in accidents where I ended up with abusive people, just name it. I mean, I almost close to died several times from typhoid fever, from my pregnancy, for just name it. It was like, oh my gosh, what else? And incredibly, like the 20 years passed without me thinking. Of course, I forgot about the 20 years, nothing. That was out of my mind. And with all these sufferings and all these things and all these challenges, now I was working for, I'm not sure, I think it was just at the moment I started to work with NASA or with the Navy. But at that moment I had to do a trip, and I ended up meeting some people. And then right there, it got a possibility for me through some friends to go meet the Dalai Lama in India. And I ended up in Dharamsala, India, receiving the teachings of the Dalai Lama for about a week. And what happened at that moment? I've been wanting to meet him all my life. Of course, imagine the Dalai Lama. This was like, whoa, this cool, incredible experience. And after I received his teachings, it was that sense of deep, deep, deep sadness. Like it was when you say, wow, how could I have caught the connection that was the most important in my life? The connection that gave me that sense of being at home here on earth, the connection that made me joyful and healthy and happy and peaceful. How could I have done that? And I realized how far apart I have grown, how many layers I have created all those years, and how far I have become from, say that now your parents, you're not just left the house, but your parents are living in the US and you are in, I don't know, in Asia. You went so far and you just kind of cut that connection. And now I had that, and I entered, like you mentioned, into deep depression.
Can I ask a question about the Dalai Lama? Because I remember I asked you about NASA and with the Navy, how people reacted to you. And you talked about this thing of you just be the light. You just, that people pick up, you don't have to say anything. You're not there to recruit anybody, which you can get into. They told you about that. You're not here to convince anybody of anything that's going on. And did the Dalai Lama, did you feel a light coming off him, and so much as the teachings, or was it just being in his presence where it inspired you, it made you move, that he didn't have to convince you? Because remember, we were talking about this thing about how do we actually, if you have this knowledge, people think, well, we got to go and save the world, we got to go to Ukraine, and we're going to stop that, we're going to do this, and that's not what they told you, correct? They told you to do something much different.
Much different. And to answer first about the part of the Dalai Lama, it was inspiration. And he's just such a pure, amazing, joyful soul. I mean, like, have the chance to sit next to him, hold his hand, and feel like, oh my God, this guy is his pureness. To me, he felt like a child, but with the wisdom of a master. So it was like being in the presence of this very, this was so much humility, so much, but at the same time, so much knowledge, wisdom, awareness in this person. So I remember sitting next to him and he's laughing and I'm holding his hand, and I just felt that sense of, you know, it was that when being with the beings of light is receiving all that, how the Dalai Lama made me feel at home with myself. And that's how I always have felt with the beings of light, at home with myself. So of course it was that sense of longing, like, oh, how could I have left home? So that was the sense he inspired me. He made me feel I want to go back home. And this all propelled me to go through what happened afterwards and have a big awakening, that depression, all that, just pretty much having the dark night of the soul, everything brought me to, wow, wake up and realize that the 20 years had passed. And I had a big awakening that happened by going to a psychologist, because it's simple. The being so light just brought me to that clarity. Is simple. You need help, go meet this guy. This opened new doors, and I had the realization like, wow, nothing ever happened to me. It happened for me. And in reality, nothing is happening because everything is in my mind. and I can choose what to do here and now. And it's
Can
again,
you elaborate a bit on that? Because I think that's one of the most important things you've ever said. Things happen for you, not to you. Because people
yeah,
will always play the victim. You'll go to
yes,
people and sometimes I'll ask people, is that your ego? Is that your higher self talking? When they talk about, oh, it's unfair and this and that and blaming people and whatever. That I think that's an important key. Can you elaborate on that thing where they're talking about how do you deal with things that happen to you in life as victim or as to use it for your benefit?
yes, and it's because it's just simply I would call it misunderstanding, ignorance. We don't know. So the moment what happened with this psychologist, he asked me to write a list of sufferings. And I wrote this list, and this list was so huge with all the stuff that when we write it together, he's like, oh my God, in my 37 years of practice, I've never met someone that has suffered this much and is mentally stable. And I'm like, what? So at that moment, again, this question, why me? Of course, came to the picture. I'm like, why me? And it's when he looked at me and he gave me the answer. I said that turn on the light in the room again. He said to me, why not? I'm like, what? And the moment he said, why not? This is the other aspect. I realized he had been listening. I've been talking to him for almost a year. And I realized he had been listening because he wasn't taking notes, but he said, look, because this you have been here, because this you did that, because this, because this, that. And at that moment, it's like all my connections, my neurons, my whole thing, just, I started to tie all the knots. And it's like, wow. And my whole perception absolutely changed. Like the miracle happened. I said, a miracle is a change in perception. And it's when I had that realization, oh, thanks to all this, I'm sitting here in this office with this person today, having this clarity. So it was just like this boom. And then it's when I had that clarity and I was at such a state of gratitude, because it's like, wow, if it wasn't for all this, I would not be here in this very moment with this absolute awareness, clarity, awakening. And it's when I realized all this had happened, not to me, happened for me to be at this state of clarity and awareness and connection. And it's when I also mentioned that something incredible happened. And is being at that moment in the absolute present moment, realizing all of that we're talking, all that list of sufferings, all that package, all that thing is in my head. And I can make the decision here and now about what to do with it. What a sense of inner power. And the third thing I experienced at that very moment was that sense of, I knew what true forgiveness was. And it was the realization of there's nothing to forgive, because nothing ever happened to me again. Nothing ever happened to me. What do I need to forget? If I'm in the state of gratitude, then what am I forgiving? I'm feeling great. I'm grateful. And then, wow, imagine the sense of freedom and liberation. I didn't need another near death. At that moment, I was like, oh, I am free from all of it. And then after that, I am in my car. That very day, I went in my car, and it's when I had this other incredible experiences that went with this awakening. And it was, I'm driving and I am in this elevated state of being. And it's when at that moment I had the absolute, again, knowing experience that what we call God, consciousness, ultimate reality source, it was the essence of absolutely everything. There was nothing that wasn't it. And I'm driving this car and I had to stop the car. I'm like, Wow. And then the two questions I have asked 20 years earlier, now is when I knew 20 years have passed. But again, Grant, is like time disappeared. Why? Because the moment that I enter in this absolute clarity, the two questions I have asked 20 years earlier, how is it possible to forget who we truly are? And when did we stop being one with the whole, were answered. This is when I knew 20 years had passed. And the answer was, one never stopped being one. One never left the whole. One just became distracted and seemingly forgot.
Beautiful.
Wow, imagine that. So now, like, and I'm in this like a state of awakening, pure being, connection. Again, look, the power of connection. I am knowing all, there's nothing, you know, it is when this clarity came, of course, there's nothing outside of self with capital S to call it something, because self or consciousness or God or it is the totality of everything. Then, of course, after that, I'm still working for NASA, yeah, with all the scientists, with all these people. And then I'm thinking, how can I share this? Well, this is beyond science. This is beyond all the studies I've done, and I've done cool stuff in the area of science, and I met cool people and I read cool books, but now this is beyond anything. And I said, how can I share this with others? And it's when, because up to that point, I had not even shared my near-death experience, none of these. My spiritual life was, I kept for myself. So at this moment now, I have this, like it was ripped up in my chest, and I am like, I want to share. Then now is when that came, that you said to me, like, how did they express this to you? My connection with the beings of light, full connected again. Like I came back home completely. And then is when I said, what can I do, or what can I say to these people? And the answer came, do or say nothing. The light of your awareness is all they need. So just be, because we are so focused, and it's when the mind takes over. We're so focused in what am I going to say or do, that we reduce this to the level of the mind. But when you are being that light, being that expression of love, being that compassion, kindness, connectedness, when you are that, then you're shining that. That's the pure teaching through your actions. That's why I said, walk your talk, be that. And guess what happened? I exactly did that. And then I will go to the office, I will walk in the corridors of the agency and just be that. And every single person, no matter even the most grumpy or the most quiet or the most in their mind person, would stop and smile or say good morning, or share a word. And people say, you know everybody in the agency. And I said, no, I don't. That's what you do. And you know, the beings of light are amazing in their analogies. They show me things that are funny, but they said, what happened when you turn a light outside and there's a lot of insects, little bugs, they get attracted to the light. When you become that beacon of light, you don't have to say or do, you attract, because that's the nature. You're shining now, that light. And they say, and guess what is the most beautiful of these? That the doing and the saying will come from the state of being. So you become an instrument. You become a vehicle for the light to shine through you. So when I asked the beings of light about purpose and mission, what was the answer? They said, Ingrid, your purpose, Grant, everyone here watching tonight, your purpose, your true purpose, no matter what career you pick, what role you pick, the true purpose of being here in this experience is to remember that you are the light. Your purpose is to be the light. And your mission is to shine that light. No matter if you're a doctor, a carpenter, a mom, a scientist, a cleaning person, it doesn't matter. Be that light. And that's when we become important. And that's when the uniqueness of the being, because we can think, okay, if there's oneness, what we look like so different, why we're unique, because it's when I said to all of us, because that's just the incredible way in which, oh God, I say, what if you have this big table with this huge banquet and all the food on the table was the same? It would be boring. We come here to experience of this variety and realize that in all these, the source of all this is that consciousness, that light, that amazing pureness of goodness, the intrinsic goodness in everything. But we can taste it in so many different fruits and so many different dishes and so many different landscapes and personalities. So this becomes so rich, so beautiful. And what we do with all these, learn to appreciate the greatness in everything.
Such wise teaching. The way I've sort of described it, and I recently got the inspiration watching an East Indian movie. I won't get into it, but anyway, it's the idea that we want everything that's easy, everything that's good, and we want God to sit there and watch us for 80 years, sit around a coffee table or sit around the kitchen table and drink coffee. And it's that ups and downs and different things that it makes. It's like nobody wants to go to a movie where nothing's happening. After 15 minutes, you say there's nothing happening here, and you leave. And so the stuff that they have given you, and you're coming out with a second book, correct, with these teachings, is absolutely amazing. The stuff that every time something you bring it out, I say, I've heard that before. It rings as truth. It absolutely. So let's get into the beings. When did you first meet them? Because they didn't happen in the near-death experience. They happened a little bit later. Can you get into how you met them, and then some of the discussions you had with your mother? Because your mother thought they were something different. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. What happened is that, like I said, right after my near death, again, the fact that I didn't forget is because things didn't stop happening. So right after, I kept having what we know nowadays as out-of-body experiences.
Yeah.
So I kept, at the beginning, I was like, it was really shocking. Like it wasn't even feeling good for the body. It was that sense of changing, like frequencies, changing colors, changing. I could hear sounds that were actually, I would just even call them scary. Yeah. Sounds and vibrations and things. And it was kind of like, what is happening? And I will go back to that realm of the light. And I kept going back, but because I was going to the realm of the light, at some point I didn't care about this journey wasn't that good, but it didn't matter. The fact that I was going there was all I wanted. And in one of these journeys, one day I was surrounded completely. This only happened at the beginning when I was sleeping, by light. And I said, people are like, if you're standing out there at night, this was light, but just to give an analogy, like you're standing out there and you see all the stars in the universe, all that you can see as far as you can see, it was like that. I was in the light, but there was star-like figures that were shining in all different colors as far as you could see. And it was like, wow, this is absolutely cool. And then it comes again, how everything happens so perfect. They, of course, that lady that wasn't paying attention when I drowned was fired, but they hired a new lady. But because I was sleeping, she didn't have to take care of me. So that was perfect for her. Oh, that girl is busy sleeping. And I was happy because I wanted to sleep. And then now in another journey, one day, a starlight figure that was shining like in pure gold approached me, and it shaped itself into a human form, and it touched me. And it's when I said, oh, wow, you are a being of light. So what was happening at that moment? This being was trying to show me we are the same. See, and I'm like, and I have realized myself as a being of light too. So, okay, yes, we are the same. And then, oh my, this incredible moment when I just say, you are a being of light. And that's when I started to call them beings of light. And then I woke up and I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. Now I wanted to sleep all the time. But it comes apart. And this is a teaching I received later in life. It's the teaching of balance. Of course, I could not be the girl that is left forever. That's not possible. So balance had to happen. And how this balance was met, like not long after all this is happening, I'm taking a shower and I'm completely relaxed there in the shower when now this huge blue light shone like huge and strongly in the bathroom, like, and I'm like, oh, now the beings of light are here. And now this is the other teaching again that like I said to you, I came to understand and comprehend things later. When I was little, this was just happening, but I didn't understand. The teachings came later. And then I understood the moment I saw these beings, and now I started to see them everywhere. I started to feel at home here in this reality. So it's when later I understood, is because there was a moment where I wanted to die. I wanted to be there. See my idea, like I want to go back there. But with this, I understood later that home was not a place, was a state of being. So when I started to see the beings of light here, I started to heal because home now was here. And I started to eat and relate with my sisters and relate with my parents. And wow, I started to eat. So now, and at the beginning, they didn't say or do anything exactly as I am mentioning. They were just there, present. And I just felt embraced and I felt at home and I felt good. So see, they're being actually the embodiment of what they're teaching me later. For a while, they never say anything. And I could smell them. I could taste them. I could feel them. I could even, like I said, smell it. Oh, they are here. They just smell like flowers. And then the moment they started to talk was about like almost a year later. And I was throwing tantrums because I could not relate with my name. I was disconnected. And it comes a part where I would just say, this is not my name. And then they were calling me one day for dinner. This is when I started to hear them, was because I threw this big tantrum. Ingrid, come to eat. Oh, I wouldn't, I was aggravated. Don't call me like that. There was days where I was more aggravated than others. And then the lady came, we're calling you for dinner, Ingrid. And I said, don't call me like that. That's not my name. Then she said, then what is your name? And I said, I do not need one. So that's when like they sent me to bed, like, oh, this girl. Then I went to bed, and it's when for the first time I was able to hear voice, to listen. And then it was incredible because it was this voice that was very compassionate and kind and soft. And it just whispered like it's telling me a secret. It's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light, as you already know. And this was so important, Grant, because at that moment was like, wow, I'm not crazy. Now I know why I don't need a name. So it just felt like, oh, this is good, this is normal. Yeah. And then they also said at that moment that I had to be quiet. Not like they were warning me, but like they did not understand. And then at that moment, because this was my reality, it was that, what is not to understand? What are you talking about? But yeah, very soon I realized that if I talk about it or mention anything, it was like this, yeah, you have an imaginary or stories or dreaming, or this is not real. You know how we're, especially with children. So
yeah, you actually had the teacher brought your mother in. They called your mother to the school, correct?
Yes, yes. So the other thing they said that people was going to be put in my path, and that's my mom, my grandma, and more people that came to bring teachings into my life. But yeah, like what happened after is that now I joined kindergarten, and because they told me not to talk, and yeah, I realized, yeah, this is not saying that they don't understand. as a child, what do? You have to express this. I started to do drawings and I was painting beings of light everywhere. So when the teacher came and like so curious, like, okay, these are the stars, this is the sun. And I said, no, these are my friends, the beings of light. And it's when like the teacher was like, oh, she's having imaginary friends. We're calling to her parents. And they already saw me as an odd kind of child because I was quiet, I was observer, I was in my own corner. It was like I was just not the normal kind of child. Super intelligent. So that was another problem in school, incredibly, because at the time they didn't have programs for children like that. So the teacher didn't even know what to do about me. And later that became a problem because they would like put me separate. It was a whole story there, but incredibly that also became a burden at some point. So, but then my mom came to school and then she's showing all these drawings. And then we had I discovered something else, that all my paintings had auras. I could see auras. I didn't up to that moment know, nobody could. So the teacher is showing all these to my mom, like thinking this is strange. And then I turned to my mom and I said, Mom, these are the colors that we wear and these are my friends, the beings of light. Like, what the heck? And my mom just looked at me with these big mom eyes, like, be silent. Like, she was a teacher too, as I mentioned before, and she didn't want me to be in trouble. So my mom in front of the teacher pretty much like, oh, this is just a phase, nothing is happening, we'll work it out. And we just left. And I was so sad, so devastated, like no one believed me. And when we're in the way home is when my mom said to me, I believe you, because I also can see things that other people cannot. Oh, imagine feeling like, oh, now someone is with me in this. And then yeah, it came the part when I was 6 years old. So she's when she confessed to me that she could see what is called a spirit. I didn't know what these spirits were. So, but when I was 6, I started to see spirits. And when I saw the first spirit, how I know it was something else, because it was something else. When I saw the first spirit, I was in absolute fear. The way it happened is a long story, but it's all written there in my book. But I saw this being entering the room, and I was petrified. I couldn't even talk, and it did all kind of things because we had a closet. My mom always left with the light on. It turned off the light, entered the closet, closed the door. So it also had physical
attributes. Yeah.
Yes, and I was able to interact with objects. So I was like petrified in fear. So I told my mom, and my mom got out of the bed early. I followed her, and it's when I said to her, Mom, no, the beings of light and the spirits are not the same. I said, this is different. I was so scared, and she's just confessed, these are the spirits that live in the house. She always has seen them. And then she said, explain to me, what is it that you see? Explain to me clearly. Now I have the capacity to explain. And then my mom said, she started to cry, and she said like, oh, I think that what you see are angels. And then I said, Mom, but they don't have wings. So because we all knew it was the Catholic teachings. And then my mom said, they have to be your guardian angels. And she taught me a prayer. And she said, if anytime I would see something that scared me, just use this prayer. And that was very important in my life after that, because I was able to meditate and pray and connect with the beings of light very strongly. So now that she's mentioning this, I'm curious, and I've been already talking to the beings of light, and I asked them, okay, my mom, first I asked about the spirits. I call them dark spirits because they cause me fear. And it's when the beings of light, I thought the answer was going to be, yeah, they're different and you're different. And the answer was incredible, because it's when they said to me, that thing that you call spirits, you, us, in essence, we are the same. The difference is the level of awareness that you have about who you truly are. Wow. And then the next thing I asked them, my mom said that you are angels. Is that what you are? And the answer again was like, blew my mind, because they said, we are what you want us to be. And later in life, again, like when I started to learn about, say, ascended masters, I asked the same thing, are you ascended masters? And they say again, in essence, we're all the same. And we are what you want us to be, what you need us to be. And they even, the colors, because I see all the colors, they said, all those colors are just frequencies. What you need will present to you. See, so this is incredible. This is just all amazing. And when I ask what is the difference, yeah, what would be an angel or an ascended master? What is the difference between this stuff? They said, no, it's just, again, experience and evolution. But some people think that evolution is knowing more. Evolution is peeling layers, is going back to source. It's knowing more in the sense that, yeah, you have to peel all you know, what you think you know, all that you have gathered, to go back to the pureness that you are, peel all the layers and go back. So again, the one that is more evolved is the one that knows who he is.
So in the UFO community, I often bring up the thing about the different types of beings. So I think what you're basically saying is the similar thing, that you're part of the experience you're having. So the higher you are, you're going to see a different sort of being. And so we even have the idea that if you're in fear, going to an experience with fear, you're going to see something different than if you go in with love. Would that be correct to say that?
It's absolutely correct, because this is the other thing. They said to me, I said, why these spirits cause me fear? And they said, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just a different frequency. What happened is I was vibrating at such a high vibrational frequency, and these beings just had different frequency. It was lower, and that caused me fear. But once I understood this fear, that never happened again. See, nowadays I could communicate with the spirits, all that, and there's no fear at all, because now I have the clarity, the understanding. So yes, once you go from the place of knowing, of clarity, then the fear is gone.
And you've had the beings, I don't know how many years it would be, but you have basically, you can communicate whenever you want, correct?
Yeah, yes, of course, because everything is here always. It's like, again, like you have your computer at any moment. If I want to connect to internet, I just turn on the computer. It's the same thing. And for this, it's so important to learn to quiet the mind. Yeah. Because if your mind is busy, like again, the example, if you're all layered, if you're all busy, if you're in a discotheque with all the noise, how are you supposed to being able to listen? The person is trying to talk to you. So same thing is just, and what did I mention from the very beginning with my first near-death experience? The silence. Yeah. And I experienced the silence. Behind the silence is that the state in which you are, again, in that pure presence, that state of consciousness in which you're connected with the whole. So that's the important step, to learn to quiet the mind.
Yeah, that's what I talk about in contact modalities, where when people say like hypnosis or meditation, all you're doing is shutting off the little voice. The little voice is talking and this ain't real, and it's just yakking away. And it's the ability to shut that thing down and pick up the signal. The signal's there for everybody to see, but we're so much in the physical world that we can't. And that's, so I think you're absolutely right. It's this idea of, to get into that state of, almost like Deepak Chopra says, you are the silence between the words, but the words are always in the way. It's creating this noise that you can't hear the signal. And so, and sometimes it comes through trauma, this near-death experience thing, where it shuts down on, you have no choice, you're going there. I mean, because it's going to shut that ego mind off and throw you into that field. So do you feel honored to have had all this experiences? And can you get into the thing about the mission idea? The book, is this mission? Is this what you came here to do? Was this intentional? How do you interpret that? Because I think more and more people are coming to the idea that the world is a little more complex than what we think it is. And so did they ask you to do the book? Can you go into that kind of stuff?
Yes. And you know, it's funny because we could think about we're more than we know we are, but at the same time, like I felt it since I was so little. In reality, it's so simple. And I love this quote that says, God is simple, the rest is complicated. So my asking every day, I wake up, Grant, and I said in the morning when I'm during my day, and I said, God, keep me simple. God, keep me humble. The more simple, the less layered. It's like, keep me connected, keep me in the space of openness, spaciousness, peace. See, keep me simple. So yeah, what was the question now with the sense of being simple? I forgot everything.
Well, the idea of the book,
Oh,
the teaching coming through the book. Do you feel you're on a sense of mission? Do you feel honored to be playing the role? And is that something you chose to do before you came here? Is this what this is about?
yes, all of them are just checked through. Yes, and yes, I feel extremely honored, so honored, Grant. I'm here talking with you and I feel honored. I feel every movement, every moment, I feel so honored. And I feel, again, I'm a vehicle for, like I always say, in that part of me that is still, of course, the ego Ingrid, they're trying to talk me, oh, whatever, bringing the stuff. Always I have to go to the place of like, please step out of the way.
Yeah.
And recognize and honor that ego is there also for a purpose, to bring me contrast, because there's so many things I still don't know about Ingrid and things that need to be corrected. And thanks to that ego there, I haven't corrected these. Oh, I haven't realized these. And I said to God, show me what I have not been able to see. Show me, but show me not so hard. I said, make it not so hard. But yeah, I feel honored. And the other thing is the sense of absolute gratitude. I feel just so grateful. And the knowing, this is the other thing people ask about knowing, how you know that when you receive, how you know that is that wisdom of the universe, or is your ego talking? And I said, because when is the ego talking, you doubt. When you're receiving, you don't. It's you don't, Grant. I think your experience is just so pure. There's nothing to doubt. It's as clear, and I just write it. This is the way it comes. And when I share it, it doesn't even need anything. It's just, and the analogies are beautiful and they're practical and they help everybody. So it's like, there it goes. This is the teaching as it came. It's pure. See, so it doesn't need to be processed by the mind. It doesn't need to be doubted. It doesn't need to be analyzed. Nothing. It's just the way it is.
As a scientist, one of the things you said that really struck me as profound, and I'd sort of thought about it, and had to do with gratitude. You mentioned gratitude. And the example I use is the fact that in your human body, 330 billion cells die every single day. And they were replaced by 330 billion cells of the same 200 types. And each cell is 100 trillion atoms. And those atoms all come together to form that cell. And I remember you talking about the gratitude of a pen, that the pen actually comes together. And can you go a little bit into this idea? And I'd like to, because you're a scientist, and people may be able to catch this, that people don't realize how complex the universe is and how grateful we should be. We assume a lot of stuff. We just take it for granted that this stuff is happening around us. And when you start looking at the complexity of stuff, you realize like, wow. And I remember you mentioning the pen, and I thought, Wow, that is something else. Can you talk a little bit about the gratitude? Because that seems to be a key element to what we are here to learn.
Yes, yes, completely. And it's when they said to me, the being Solar said to me, you don't imagine how grateful, Ingrid, you would be, you, Grant, everyone here will be if they realize that for you to exist, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of subatomic particles have to be in agreement.
There you go.
So you are a divine intention. And look at the power of connection again, which is, again, what I came to bring from my first near-death experience. And they said, Ingrid, and imagine this pen, like I was mentioning, or the water that you drink, or the paper that you're writing on. These trillions of subatomic particles are here together for you to use this pen.
Wow.
And how this knowledge came through, again, by the connection we have with the wisdom, with the creative wisdom of the universe. Because this is the other teaching. They said to me, Ingrid, you think that you're thinking? And I said, of course I'm thinking all the time. And they said, no, people are not really using the true gift of thinking as a gift. Because 98% of the time, or 95 or 97, people are trapped in memories.
Wow.
So you're recycling, you're in the same, all same. You're really only using the power of thinking, the true thinking of the universe, this thinking mind that could just be aligned with the creative thinking of the universe through calming the mind and being that vehicle to serve. That's the true mission. And that's when you're really empowering yourself. And that combined with this principle of gratitude, realizing trillions of, wow, of particles are agreeing to be this pen, agreeing to be this paper, agreeing to be you, agreeing to be me. When you enter in that state of gratitude, appreciation, wow, feeling honored, then what are you doing? That's the highest vibrational frequency there is. And when you're vibrating at that level of being, you're experiencing that state of oneness. You're connected with everything. Imagine if I see in you the light. I see in you that intrinsic goodness, that divine intention. God. Then now we are there.
Yeah, it's almost the analogy of the body, 100 trillion cells all working together. And when one is not in agreement, when a cell decides, I'm going to do whatever I want, they'll tell me what to do, it's called a cancer cell.
Exactly.
And we don't realize that they're all working together, doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
And we just take that for granted.
And when you go rogue, then now I put the example of the people, like you have the fingers and the hand. It's the same thing with the cell. Like what happened if I cut this finger off? What is it going to do? Nothing. And it's disrupting the rest. What happened when you have them together? I said they're unique. But look what they do when they work together. And they're unique, but they're connected to the same hand. This is unity and oneness. So you have the two principles there, unity and oneness. So yes, and this is the other thing that they said to me. I remember one day I'm walking and they said to me, look at that bird. And that bird is in the present moment. Feel the wind is in the present moment. Feel your steps are in the present moment. Each cell in your body, each subatomic particle is in the present moment, because if your cells were thinking about the future, or your atoms or something, you disintegrate. You have to be here and now, doing the work here and now. So they said, what is the only thing that is not here and now?
That's right. It's in the past and the future, right?
Exactly. Only when you're here and now and you're again connected with that creative thinking of the universe is when you become that amazing creator. And it's when, say that you're trying to resolve a mathematical problem. Many people, they don't resolve it the moment they're in the problem, because again, you are in the memory. It happened the moment you're walking, you're taking a shower, you were in a vacation, you were driving, cooking. I know the answer. Because at that moment, your focus of attention, you just came clean. You're just not doing something in which you're focusing your mind.
Yeah, that was the laser and the hologram are both invented. They went through the problems, they couldn't figure it out, and they were sitting on a park bench. One was waiting for a restaurant to open, and the other was watching a tennis game, and suddenly their mind quieted, and the thing popped in their head, and they went running back to write it down.
Exactly.
So that exactly true. It just fascinating. I mean, it's the same, almost the same sort of you get across Christian religion or religions, like even Jesus said, look at the birds. They don't do this, they don't do that, and yet they're taken care of. This be in the present moment. Or Ram Dass, who is one of the more famous, people in the psychedelic movement, Be Here Now was his book. So these are lessons. What would you say the 5 main lessons that they want us to get? If you were to bring it down to 5 main things that would keep you, gratitude would be one, oneness, be here now. What would be some of the key lessons that you think people should take out of this, our discussion tonight, that would just sort of ease a lot of the pain of life?
I would say definitely quiet the mind.
Yeah.
Because a quiet mind, again, is a mind that can go to that place of connection, can go to that place of inner peace, and it's when you can connect with that wisdom. Another super important part is that wisdom, because the intelligence alone don't do it. That's the mind working. Intelligence without wisdom is actually dangerous. You use things for the wrong purpose. So it's like, be quiet the mind. Inner power is the place when you give to yourself the possibility of have a space, and you have that connection with wisdom. Now you empower yourself. See, it all comes to that place of learn to quiet the mind. And when you're in that state of gratitude and appreciation, which is the other one, you are in that state of connection. You're seeing the goodness in everything. This is something beautiful. The beings of light told me recently. They said, oh my God, this is so beautiful. They said to me, look, when you look at the flowers, the sun, the sunset, the stars, you see the good, isn't it? Oh, this is beautiful. This is good. What are you seeing in the goodness? God. When you feel great, look at the great, you feel great. What that means, you bring the state of gratitude. You don't feel gratitude for something that feels yucky. You feel gratitude for something that feels great. So they said, when you see the flower, when you see all these beautiful things, you see God. And when you have a problem, when you're in a challenge, you call for God. So at the end, God is in everything. So the thing is that, like, learn to quiet the mind, learn to see that intrinsic good in everything. Learn to see your challenges as opportunities to grow and evolve. And just walk this light with the intention of wanting to see. Because you have to have the will. You're not open to see. If you want to just keep sleeping in the couch, if you're not open, the beings of light said to me, don't believe. Even the beings of light, Grant, they said to me, I was a child, they say, don't believe anything we say, but have an open mind.
Wow.
An open mind is the one that allows you to be there. Okay, open to all possibilities. Yes.
Wow. Fascinating. A couple more things I would like to get through. One of the things you just mentioned is this idea. In the world today, we have this idea there's good people, there's bad people, there's good things, there's bad things. And I think the world we did an interview. One was a girl who had a near-death experience. The other was a sort of a hypnosis person who did healing stuff with people. And one was just a guy who was in float tanks. So it was the same thing. He'd be going to float tanks and the mind would shut down. And they had this experience, and I'd like you to comment on it, where they said, especially the girl who went face first. I think you had a motorcycle accident as well. She had a near-death experience, face first off into the concrete off a motorcycle. Had this near-death experience, And she said the near-death experience was that everything was absolutely perfect. Everything is exactly, and all three of these people had the same thing. Is that basically what we're looking at? Because the world that people try to paint is this world where there's good things and bad things, and there's bad spirits and bad aliens and good aliens, and it's this duality of we're in the middle of this thing. What's your take on this? Is everything under control? Is God got it all under control? Almost like the expression used before: things happen for us, not to us.
Yes, yes, it's exactly like that. Everything, I just, with all these, when I see the perfection of the universe. I remember there was a moment again when I had an experience in which I had a fight with someone, and I was out of alignment. It was that sense of like, of course you're just now out of your, I'm like, whoa. And then it was this fight with this person, and then again in my car, I mean driving the car, because at that moment you're not focusing anything, you just have to drive. And then it's when I had again that absolute going back to that place of like, I said, how can I go back to self? See the question like, oh, how can I align? How can I go back to self? And it's when I had that absolute realization, of course, there's nothing outside of self with capital S, because self is the totality of everything. And at that moment, I so much appreciated that fight or that problem or that situation that had happened with that person, because it was like, oh, thanks to that disalignment or misalignment, I was able to get to this clarity. See, if that contrast didn't happen, if that discussion didn't happen, I would not have had experience again, this reminder again of like, look, everything is good. And that is when I have that sense at that moment that everything is perfect and everything is happening for a reason. But this is the other thing, and it's very important. I bring this teaching because people say, but what happened about the world? How can you say that war is good, or this is good, or that is good? And I said, for starting, in reality, everything is neutral. And we're the ones that put value on everything. And secondly, the beings of light said to me, never think in terms of the collective. The moment you think in terms of the collective, you lost the battle. And they gave me an analogy, and the analogy is incredible, is a castle. And say that you have this castle, and the castle is huge. Imagine a castle. And the castle is a mess. You have been throwing these big parties, and now the castle is a disaster. Every room is messy. Now, today you make the good decision that you're going to organize the castle. That's good. You have the good intention. But what if right now at this moment you stand there and say, I'm going to organize this whole castle in one morning? You lost the battle. You become disempowered. You're just like, you're overwhelmed already. So imagine the castle is symbolizing the world. You could, I mean, what? Yeah, you can have the best intention, but if you think about the whole castle, you're lost. But what about you make the wise decision? See, now is when wisdom comes into place. To think, what if I go room by room? Look, I cannot even go room by room, it's too much. What about I go corner by corner, space by space? See, and the moment that I go and like, okay, I organize the table in the kitchen. Wow, that's good. Now you empower yourself and you show the other, look what I did. I was able to, I can teach you how. Okay, show me. See, so the beings of light said to me, do not be concerned with what others do, not because you don't care, but because you care so much that you correct and fix yourself first. Go room by room, cleaning and organizing your own home. What is yourself? Then now extended to your house, your family, your neighbor, how you behave, how you treat others. which decision you make to be today with the people around you. I say always, when you get up in the morning, I put the example of a cake. You were to bake a cake today, how you want to bake this cake with the best ingredients. So when I share it with you, Grant, it's like, wow, this cake is good. But I can make the decision of, I'm going to put poison in this cake. And I'm going to eat it. Oh my God, the stomach ache. I'm going to share it. Oh God, everybody has a stomach ache. So what is the decision I'm making today? How I am going to start and how I'm going to empower myself. They said, start for home. And what I do here causes a ripple effect. So now the other person, oh, wow, Ingrid really did it. What about I do it? And then the other person, and then the other person. And that is when we are actually working from the place of wisdom and empowerment.
That's almost like the idea that you had where you just sort of take care of yourself. You don't try to convince other people. Because if you look at it in a multiple life thing, when you go into the next world, you'll go, oh, then you remember who you actually are, and you go, well, that was pretty weird. I mean, that, you know, I chose to be here at this time and have these experiences, whatever. And maybe you died in a past life where it really wasn't fair, and you don't go, I'm really upset. You go, that was kind of interesting. And because you're going to die many times and have all these experiences. And we get wrapped up into sort of like trying to save the world and be messiahs. When it comes down to it, I think you probably agree that if there's any sort of life review, you can't bring up, you know, Hillary Clinton or your mother-in-law or, you know, all these things. They're going to go, that it's not about them. You made this agreement to come into the world at this time in this place. How did it work out? Because you're the one that planned it. Would you think that is right, that we plan what we're going to do, and it's basically we take care of ourselves and let our light shine? I think you've talked about this numerous times. You let your light shine,
Yes.
and that's how you influence the world.
Yes, the being so light said to me, live your life in a way that you will not need a life review. Wow, what that means. Absolute responsibility.
Wow, I never heard that before. That's interesting.
Yes, with absolute awareness. Oh my gosh. So yes, when we have that clarity, and it goes back to the place again of know thyself. If you learn to know you and you're acting from that place of knowing who you truly are, then now you're really taking the horse by the leash, and you're living your life with responsibility. And the being so light said to me, Ingrid, you're not here to convince anybody about anything. They say your path is the path of gentleness. Look at how, oh my God, I've taken that again. God made me humble. God keep me simple. God keep me gentle. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything, just by shining that light, by being in your home, with your family, with the people around you, the way you are. Again, you don't need to save the world. You're already saving the world when you're being pure where you are at. See, because this is powerful, and this creates effects that are really big that we cannot even measure. But one person that comes to you and feels your light is going to go to their house, and this other, and this, and is going to spread. This is amazing. It's absolutely beautiful. And to answer your question that you asked a couple of times about pre-planning things, yes. And the reason why my near-death experience happened when I was so young is because I meant to remember pretty fast. Yes, because people ask me always this question about forgetting and remembering, and the being so light made it clear to me. They said, Ingrid, of course you're going to forget all that, because many the things you're not need. They say, why to keep the old wardrobe when you can get a new one, a fresh one? They say, if you come with all the stuff that is not needed, you will be preoccupied. You imagine remembering all the traumas of the other lives, or all the financial problems, or all the difficulties. You could not start fresh. This is a gift. The possibility to start fresh is the greatest gift we can receive. So why to want to remember all that? But guess what? What you already have gained in the level of knowing who you truly are, you never forget. See, the layers that you have peeled, in the sense that you remember in your true nature, that's what is need to be remembered. The rest doesn't matter. See, that's the truth. So if I already have been walking this path of awakening for a very long time, when I came as Ingrid, I didn't really need to wait that long, because I already had it in me. This awakening process have been already happening, and I've been working long time to get where I am. So the idea is I come here, I'm very quick. I meant to remember. I'm very quick. And when I was little, and when I mentioned that I have the abilities to know, and I apply all these, thankfully, the part of analysis and logic, and becoming a scientist and all that. People ask me, actually, how could you become a marine scientist if you drown? You should be super scared of water. And I said, no, because drowning brought me to see the light. So for me, it was that sense of like, I meant to go deeper, see the parallel. I meant to just really keep deepening and cleaning and freeing all those layers. So yeah, you don't forget the truth. The rest is just stuff. And when people ask me if they need to remember their past lives, I said, hey, you have access to them, that's good. In my case, I started to have access when I was very young, but I said, it doesn't matter. The important thing, I said, is not how many lives, what you did before, is like who you are today. I said to them, if you want to know all your lives, know the life that you're living today. Be aware of who you are today, what you do today, the way you respond today, the way you act today, the friends you have, the family you have, the environment you have today is showing you, is a projection of all your lives. Where you are today can tell you like the summary of all your lives. So I said the important thing is that you resolve today. If you have the chance to remember things, that's cool, but it's not that important.
You are one of the brightest lights I've ever run into. I'm just absolutely honored to be able to talk to you and to pick up just your vibration. And your book, Brightly Guided Life, did you get a lot of replies back? I mean, I think the book probably did pretty well. Did you get people who were inspired to write to you and who were moved by the book?
Yes, like hundreds of people in reality. And I never thought of it would happen this way. I never even imagined, Graham, because when I wrote the book, I was actually very reluctant, and I was resistant. I was like, no, I don't want to write about my life. I thought it was kind of egotistic. I said, no. And the beings of light, no, I cannot write that book. No. And this is the other thing. People say, oh gosh, your book is brutally honest. How could you write that? And I said, because that's the thing. You have to be transparent. Yeah. Give it all or give nothing. That's what I think. And then when I started to write the book that I didn't want to write, Grant, if I didn't write it, I would have been sick. Yeah. Because it came through, and I was sleeping, and in the middle of the night, I would wake up and I had to write. And I was driving the car and I had to stop and I had to write. And I was at work and I had to write. And we're at the supermarket, I had to write. It was like, oh my God. And it came, in reality, I could even write 3 books from this book. We had to just summarize everything in, but it was at the beginning, it was 170,000 words. Wow. We just had to put it in one, I would just say close to 70,000 words, because yeah, who's going to read that huge book? But
you have a second book coming, correct?
I have a second book, but now it's I thought I would kind of put more books about the autobiography, but I decided, no, let's just bring the pure teachings of the beings of light. And this is this book I'm writing. And yeah, with the first book, it was the thing that people ask me, you saying that you're writing a bestseller? And I said, no, I didn't even know what was going to happen with this book. And I said, look, if one person read this book and it does good to that person, I am already a bestseller. And when I received the first email, and the first email was very impactful because it wasn't just any email. It says, your book saved my life.
There you go. Wow.
I was like, what? And then the second and the third, and then now I started to receive like tons of messages through the media, through my media pages, through my website, through my email. It was like, wow. And yeah, I get hundreds of emails, people saying how amazing the book. I think the beautiful thing about the book is very simple. Anybody can read it. Anybody can feel connected with the experiences, and that's what I get the most. I can connect with this. I've been there. I can feel this. You help me answer this question, because every chapter of the book has like a teaching that is kind of bring us to understand. And because almost many of the chapters are like sufferings that happen, and how I could see truth and how I could see purpose behind those sufferings. So to help people to see, to see the purpose behind their own sufferings and how to use all these to awaken.
Wow, you're a wonderful ambassador, and I've heard this story numerous times where people, the one where the woman real estate agent, where it comes home, I think I may have told you the story. She puts the computer on and the Word program is open, and she says, "What's the Word program? I've never used the Word program." And she looks, and it's like 3.5 pages of her story, and she goes, "Oh no, we're not going there." And they just wouldn't leave her alone. And then when the book was finished, her family actually got an injunction to stop her from publishing the book because they were real estate agents in a small town. And then she tells the story that when she's driving along, and all of a sudden there's this like a 3D screen in the car, and she's going, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Oh, this is the first scene to your movie, and it's now going to move into Hollywood." So I think yours is the same sort of thing, where these are kind of stories that people read them with interest. They may not really pick them up right away, but subliminally the message is getting across. And I think the important part of yours is we're in a very materialistic society where science dominates. And you are a scientist talking about probably the most important thing about how does reality work, what happens when you die. And I think it'll go a long way in terms of scientists who, are afraid to come out, afraid to talk about it, where they realize, oh, me too. So I really, appreciate the fact that you stepped out to do it, because a lot of people will not if they're in an academic career. I worked in a university for 40 years. I know that a lot of people will not talk about it because they're afraid of their credentials. People are you're going to lose your funding and all this kind of stuff. So kudos to you for stepping forward, even though as you described, they basically forced you to do it. They pushed you along, and you see this over and over again, that you are a vehicle for this message to get through.
And what is beautiful when you mention science is that when I said to people, spirituality is not religion, spirituality is not woo-woo thing. I said spirituality is science. And this is the most beautiful thing of all, because it's bringing the clarity to people. You don't imagine all the perks when you become a spiritual. We are in our nature spiritual, because spirituality is the true nature that we are, is our authentic self. So there's always been a confusion thinking that for you to be spiritual, you require something. Actually, no, you actually have to peel everything.
Yeah.
It's when they say, forget everything you know. What is this meaning? Go back to the simplicity, to the authentic self, to the place where your heart, your self is radiating that light, that well-being, that connection, that love, that purity. So I said to people, look, for you to be actually spiritual, you have to apply the scientific method. They're like, what? And I said, yeah, because spirituality is not a belief. Spirituality is when you just belief is the beginning of everything. It's like when you go like, oh, you start with observation. And you just go, I'm like, oh, I wonder. Then somebody believes in something and you said, I could just tell you, Grant, look, above those clouds, there's a sky that is blue. And you could say, okay, stay in the place where I believe what you say, or really become a scientific person with the idea of I want to know, and say, no, I'm going to explore deeper what is beyond those clouds and see if Ingrid is telling the truth. So it starts from that place of like, I want to know, curiosity. That's investigation. So at that moment, that's observation, like I want to know. So then you start finding the way how I get there. Then now is the part where you just go and do what you need to do to get there. So start with having that curiosity, then you're applying that observation. Now you go experience it. Or you do whatever, you apply the methods that you need to apply, you get a result and you compare.
Mhm.
So I said to people, if you want to be compassionate, it's not like, oh yeah, compassion there in the, yeah, that person there. Then you become that compassion being. And you realize, oh, I'm becoming, and then when you peel the layer, I'm becoming what I already am. You're just going back to the root that you are. Compassion, oh, love, then be that loving person. A giver, be that giver. See, then do it yourself. Now you experience it for yourself, you get a result, you compare. So I say to people, being actually spiritual is amazing. It has the perks of that you become more efficient, you become empowered, you have wisdom, you become more intelligent, because now it's plus what you study in school, you're adding wisdom to it. What is experiential, you're adding understanding and clarity. So who doesn't want to be spiritual? I would just go say, wow. So now you're actually grabbing it all and realizing, yes, come in my mind, bring me to make the best choices, to give the best answer, to know where to go. You know, there was a moment where people, I joined this group and they were talking about the power of manifestation. And everybody was like, okay, what are your desires? Write it here, what you want to manifest. And it was the list of the stuff, the car, the job, I don't know, the grant, the whatever. And it's when I had like, wow, this deep clarity. I already have suffered so many things. I've been in so many places. I just knew that all these needs were something that were not important to me. I respect other people, but that was not important to me. And when I made my list of the things I truly desire, I wanted 3 things. And the 3 things were wisdom. So I imagine if you have wisdom, this part, you know where to go, what to do. You have that, the knowing. Second, compassion. You're a compassionate being. You have that openness of the heart. Now combined with wisdom, wow, you're just this amazing being. And courage, to be able to keep walking the path and doing all we do and going through all the challenges. So compassion, wisdom, and courage. This was my asking. And then when you just really live your life with that intention of being that being, now you become the ambassador for that. And you know, and later in life, I know that I had evolved when one day, and I don't know, I told you that all that happened also when the being so light, because I was thinking about all that, and they came, and they can be very funny. And they said, if a genie will show today and you ask 3 wishes, what those 3 wishes were. And it's when I had that, yeah, I would like compassion, wisdom, and courage. That are my wishes. And later the years passed, and I knew that I had evolved, because there was one day the being so light appear from, again, like it just happened, like out of the blue, that say, oh, if the genie would appear today again, what would be your 3 wishes? Because again, sometimes we don't know where we are at in our process of awakening until contrasts or situations present. We don't know. And then at that moment, I had this it was so amazing, Ram, because I had this clarity that I didn't even have these 3 wishes to ask. And I only had one. And my only one wish at that moment was like, I wish, and it was not even a wish for me. It was a wish for humanity. And I said, I wish that everybody would be able to realize the abundance that they are. If every human being realized that they are the totality, the wholeness, that they're absolutely abundant, then selfishness would end, fear will end, trying to take from others will end, hunger would end, war would end, because you will be at the state where you know that you have it all already.
Wow, what powerful messages. I hope your second book comes out. Maybe we can talk again when your second book comes out. It's like when you would know the same thing, that when you hear truth, you know truth. And that's why I always say with the UFO experience have the same problem as you would have in other spiritual phases where they don't get listened to. And I say, basically what you're doing in your science is you believe you've got all the puzzle pieces and you're just missing one puzzle piece. You've got it all figured out. And you're shuffling the puzzle pieces around, trying to make them fit, instead of realizing that when someone like Ingrid comes along and says, I was in a time and space, there was no time and space, I could move from here to here. And then you realize that's an anomaly. And it's the 5% of anomalies that are outside the spectrum that tell you something's wrong. This wouldn't be happening if Ingrid was telling the truth. This shouldn't be happening. You got to listen to the experiencers, the people who have the message. And that's why I think it's so important what you have. And I always try to encourage people to listen to these people, because this is where the truth, almost like Anne Strieber said, Whitley, I'm not really sure what's going on here, but whatever it is, all these people are writing these letters and people are talking about death being part of this whole thing. And now it's come around, almost like you and I would probably agree that 40 years ago, I never, ever would have believed I would be where I am now. I mean, it's like you're a completely different person. Almost every couple of years, you're a different person, because you stay open to these new ideas. And then you have empathy and compassion for others who don't, because it's almost like you said when you were a little kid, you go like, why don't these people get it? Like 75 to 80% of all near-death experience people get divorced. And they get divorced because they're completely different people, and people can't figure out who they are. You become a new person, and it's that growth. Whereas people sort of turn in and they go into the stuff that we have and almost living like lives of quiet desperation. So I always feel honored that you and I got to play this game. It's like I always describe it as, if you realize what's actually going on, you realize you're in the Super Bowl of the World Cup of all stories. There is no bigger story. And not only did you get to know the game is on, you're on the field playing the game. Most people don't even know there's a game. They're not in the stadium. They have no idea what's going on. And
This is so cool.
And that's where when I hear you, when I first heard you on Boot at the Gas Pump, I said, wow, this girl knows what's going on. I just know it because it's exactly what I was told. It's exactly what most spiritual traditions say. So I'm namaste. I'm honored to have had the chance just to talk to you and to share with the people who listen to me your message, because I think it is the truth. It's very, very enlightening. It's coming from the field. It's very important, and people should listen to it.
Oh, I feel so honored to be here, Grant. Thank you so much. And I just want to add one more thing to this, and is you're mentioning there, like we can have that time where and that happened to me when I was a child, when I would just say, why these people don't get it? And divorces happen and things happen because we don't have the clarity. These things happen and now we don't understand it. What happened when I had what I call my big awakening? Because one thing is to be a pure child with this knowledge or this happening in a natural way. And the other thing is being an aware child. Because I always say the more these happen, the more I feel I go back to be a child. This is just that sense of like, I feel even embraced. When I see the beings of like, many times I feel embraced like I am a baby. It's just that sense of pureness. But But what happened with all those 20 years that I mentioned that all these sufferings happened? They were so needed. Why? Because I remember the time when I would just say, why they don't get it? But I had I think it was maybe we can call it arrogance, because it was like, are they stupid? What is happening to these people? But I needed to realize how easy it was to get lost, how easy it was to lose the focus of attention, how easy it was to forget. And then I went again, like crumbling and like all the furniture, like my analogy in the room, become an obstacle. Why? Because I needed to go back to that place of empathy and compassion and understanding and feeling like that love for the one that doesn't understand. And I said, it doesn't matter that I say, just to give an example, that I am in college. I'm not going to go talk to a child that is in kindergarten with arrogance, because I'm not accomplishing anything. And it's when the beings of light say your path is the path of gentleness. But I had to learn that. And I had to learn that, wow, is with love, and going down to the place, meaning down, or putting myself in the place or the position of the person that is not getting it. And being able to feel that sense of being humble and being able to share. That's why the analogies that the beings of light give me, and I love it so much, are so simple and so sometimes funny, and things that people can relate with, because that's the part where the teaching becomes real. When people can sense it and say, I get it, I can make it my own.
The empathy and compassion would almost be how the beings treat you when they you don't get it, you're not getting it, and they just keep understanding that you're not there yet, that nobody, almost like Jesus said, let he who's perfect cast the first stone. Like nobody's got it all together. Exactly. And we're all at different levels, and you have compassion, and you live your life almost like you said with the Buddha, like a very wise child, with a child with this wisdom, that we should empathize that, and it goes out that we try to do it the best we can with what we've got, because in the end we came in here alone, we're going to leave alone, and we're going to go back into the oneness, and we'll come back again for something else. Or sometimes people, I don't know if you've ever run into these people who say, I'm off the karmic wheel, I'm never coming back. And I always go, like, what are you going to do? Like, I mean, how long can you sit on a beach in Hawaii and drink Mai Tais? For how many billion years can you? Yeah, after the first afternoon, you go, can we go back? And you feel good when you're actually doing something, when you're actually helping, and this sort of thing. So
even when you are what is the out of the karmic wheel, like you are saying, now you feel that sense, even bigger sense of purpose. You want to serve. It's like when I had that experience in which that wish I asked was that everybody realized the abundance that they are. Is the first time that I experienced what is the union between giving and receiving. It was the sense like, oh, I understand what is this state in which you don't need to receive anything, but now you want to give. It's just pouring out like those waterfalls behind you. It's like the water is just, and now you want to give this to others. And you become at service. I remember it so clearly when I was ready to serve, and I'm ready to serve. And now it's like the focus of attention changed from you to now, how can I shine the light for others? Yes.
Because the beings would be that way. I mean, that's the only reason they're here, is to serve, they're part of the one. And that's the whole thing. They all work together, like the pen, like the body. Everybody's working together. We're the only ones that think that it's service to self over service to others. Like we're taking care of our ego. And the beings, that's all they do. I mean, they're here, they're trying to help, and this sort of thing. They're not trying to get any money or
nothing, because they already have everything. When you already realize that you are the abundance, then what is to get? There's nothing to get. Exactly. So now you just in that state of complete giving. You just become an altruistic being. And of course, in my case, people ask me, oh, but you think you're enlightened? And I said, I don't know nothing. I said, I know I'm not, because I keep finding challenges. So if I was enlightened, I would not have challenge. I would know. So that to me, it's like, I know there's things I need to keep correcting. And there's the contrast is presenting in my life. So, okay, there's things I haven't corrected. There's things I haven't yet resolved. There's things I'm still working with myself. So this is perfect, because I said, no, I want to continue until, who knows? That's all just the fluidity of the universe. Like you said, the moment we correct ourselves, we just completely selfless being doing the work for others. So it's just, I said, who has the agenda? Don't put an agenda in your mind. Just flow free. Let yourself be free to just be. That's all.
Yeah, and you're just sharing what you believe, and this is what I said at the beginning, is when you get real knowledge, you know this is real, and you want to share it because you think, do you know this? And you're just putting it out. So you're not really saying you're something special. You're just getting material from somewhere, and you're sharing the material. And you can believe it, disbelieve it, whatever. It doesn't really matter whether people do. But that's why they want the books out. That's why they want people to come in. And it may be, people will complain about the situation in the world. And I always say, you got to remember that you and I both chose to come here at this time, in this place, in the middle of whatever mess we think we find ourselves in. And maybe we came for a reason. And when you start taking responsibility that maybe I'm here for a reason, then you don't worry about what everybody else is doing. You don't care. All you worry about is, why did I come into the world? What is going to happen when I leave? And am I doing what I said I was going to come here to do? Because when you get on the other side, you can't say, oh, I would have done it, but I lived in Mississippi, so I decided I wasn't going to do it. I mean, we have these ideas that we get exemptions, and we're the ones that are making the plan. There's nobody judging us. We're the ones that are running the play. And so we have to take personal responsibility in it. And until you admit you're not a victim, you're never going anywhere. If you keep seeing yourself as a victim, nothing happens. So you just want to share it. And that's why I think your story is so important. Probably one of the most important stories I think I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of stories over almost 50 years. And it's that this idea that these are stories that will basically tell us, in some ways, what's going on in the world. It's not the world people think it is. It's completely different when you start looking at it, but you've got to explore above the blue sky. You've got to actually ask questions, or as René Descartes, who invented the scientific method in a dream, which people seem to leave out, that he got it in a dream in 3 nights, and that his basic thing on the skepticism was not to be skeptical about new ideas. If you read what he actually said, he said, I'm skeptical of everything I learned. I'm tearing apart my former life. And he realized that some of the stuff that he had been taught was not right. And that's where the skepticism, don't believe everything that's happening. Oh, I've got it all figured out. That's where the mistake is. And when you see these new things, like stories like yours or other people that are telling stories, you realize, like, if that story's true, then you can learn something from this. And that is the new world that you are helping to build, is this world where we realize it's not the physical world we think it is. It's going to be, as I said, it's going to be a lot less physical than people think it is. It's going to be a lot more spiritual than people think it is. And a lot of people are going to be very upset about that. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. And it will not have a hint of capitalism. It'll all be altruistic. It's all about working as one, or even as the one being. The one guy said on board the ship, he said, let me ask you, because he was really angry. He said, what's your concept of God? And he said that the being said, we are one with the one who is all. And the guy said he was so floored he had to sit down. He couldn't believe it. He was floored by this. And that's that message that you've got, and everybody else has got this idea. Remember who you actually are. It is all one thing. You are part of the one, and we are all here, on this thing to share and to live and to experience. And so I'm absolutely honored. I just want to add one last question: is what are you doing now? Look, in terms of, do you have interact with people? How do people contact you? This sort of thing.
Yes. And before I get to that, is this, again, this beautiful teaching that says God did not create the universe. Yeah. God is the universe.
Yeah.
That's it. Is go back to that. I am that I am, that principle of there's nothing outside of it. So yeah, that's just the pureness of the whole. But yeah, nowadays I stopped my work as marine scientist, although I want to mention something quick here, and is that, again, like just reinforcing this, one of the perks of being connected with the inner wisdom, with that creative thinking of the universe, with all these, is that everything you do reflects that. So when I was working as a scientist, the incredible projects I worked with and created came from there. I worked with this huge project about mangroves and teaching people how to manage their resources in intelligent way. And it wasn't about prohibiting, it was about teaching people to connect, to teach people you are nature. Again, going back to the principle of unity. And I work with climate change, and I work with huge projects in NASA about carbon cycles in the planet, teaching people how to be responsible of all these. See, everything that you do is a reflection of that. So when you're connected, so I said, people go, it's just my push of like, go try it. Go try that thing that called spirituality that is being wrongly believe that is something woo, something weird. No, go try it, calm your mind, and you'll see what you can create. You become the creator of your own reality. So now, with all this is what I do now. I love to now teach people, bring people to these clarities. Oh, I just say at the end, I'm not teaching anything. I'm just letting the life flow through me. And yeah, we become what is called a teacher, but in reality, I'm not teaching anything. I'm just bringing the clarity of this truth to the light, to the awareness of people that want to listen. And this is the other thing nowadays. I teach classes, I do one-on-one meetings with people. This is just people want to know, and they want to understand their experiences. They come to me, and I do seminars and retreats, and this is what I love to do right now. I just, to me, is when I reached the point where that path, that part of my life ended, and when that moment arrived, I went to my job and I said, I'm done. What can we do for you to stay? Nothing, I'm sorry. And this is what I do now, and I love to do, just work at the service of God, because this is that's the answer. I'm serving God, and I have a website called ingridhonkala.com, and I have the media pages, and just to bring it now that we're here with this, I am I start April 23rd. I am going to teach a 4-week course called The Way of Self-Empowerment, Joy, and Well-Being. Wow. And it's 4 weekends of teaching people how to know yourself, how to get there, how to meditate, how to practice mindfulness, but in really simple ways that can be applied even for the person that said, I have never meditated in my life and I cannot do it. Oh, I show you how. When you're preparing your coffee, very simple ways to bring people there, and showing the perks of doing all these practices. And then the other class is, the first class is this, the other class is everything about forgiveness. What is truly forgiveness? What are the misconceptions of forgiveness? What is good about that? And then the other class is just the way to joy and well-being. How can really be joyful people, the misconceptions about joy and happiness. And yeah, it's a really beautiful course. And the other one is mindfulness of emotions. What is the purpose of emotions? What is the true purpose of fear? What is the true purpose of pain? What is all this for? And how we can understand our challenges as a way to awaken to with purpose. So it's going to be a really beautiful 4-week course.
Beautiful. I'm going to put the link in there. You send me the link and we'll make sure that's linked. And I will do whatever I can to promote your message because I think it is key. It's the same message everybody else has, but it's the way you deliver it, the excitement that you have, the scientific background where people will listen to you when they might not listen to other people. So whatever I can do to help you and promote you, again, I'm just absolutely honored that I got a chance. It's one of the most fulfilling interviews I've ever done. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And we'll see where it goes. And I think the world has been brightened by your light. Your book is a brightly guided life, how a scientist learned to hear her inner wisdom, and absolutely true. And I've listened to almost every interview you've ever done, and I'm just absolutely overjoyed that I actually got to talk to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me here. And to close, I would just say, like, if people ask me what is different in your teachings, because you just mentioned it there, I would just say nothing. If I was teaching you something else, I would be lying. There's only one truth. But the difference is, like you say, how we deliver the message. We connect with different people, the way we feel good.
And you got it through these ways. Like you've had the out of body experiences, which 80% of UFO experiencers claim they've had out of body experiences. You've had the near death experience. You've had the encounter with the beings. So it's almost like there is a field of knowledge, and you can either access it or you can access it. And you are, I believe, one of the people who have, for whatever reason, for however you did it, you can access this material, and the answers are out there. This is pure material. It's not ego mind. So I think it's very important that people pay attention to it. And I'll do whatever I can to make sure that your message gets out. And thank you for sharing with me.
Thank you so much, Grant. This has been an honor, a big pleasure. And I just feel so grateful. So grateful.
Beautiful. Thanks again. And we'll end it there.
Thank you.